today we've got a bunch of representatives from different manga publishing companies that publish in North America, and we're going to talk about what's hot, what's new, what's coming up, what's keeping them up at night, and some of the questions that we got from people on social media. Let's have our panelists introduce themselves. So let's start with Mark.
All right, sure. Thanks, Deb. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I am Mark Vera, and I am the Sales and Marketing Director at Yen Press. I've worked at Yen for a little over a year at this point, but I've worked in the manga industry for about a decade. So pretty much my entire adult life has been selling Japanese comics. So as such, I'm pretty happy to talk about it with you all today.
Let's go to Kevin next.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hamric. I'm the Vice President of Publishing Sales at VIZ Media. I've now been with VIZ for 10 years, thus selling manga and graphic novel books for 10 years, and very excited to be a part of this panel.
Ed, how about you next?
Hey, my name is Ed Chavez. I'm the president of Denpa Books, small publishing house out of Portland, Oregon. Been working in the manga industry, I think, for about 15 years now. As of last month, it would be 4 years here with Denpa.
All right, let's go to Leyla next.
I'm Leyla Aker. I'm Director of Publisher Services at Penguin Random House, working for Square Enix Books and Manga. And I have been working in the manga field for longer than I can calculate, I think about 15 years now.
My name's Ivan Salazar. I'm the Senior Marketing Director over at Kodansha. I've honestly only been working in manga for about a year and a half. That's been with Kodansha, but I'd been working in comics for about a decade up until now. And honestly, I've really enjoyed the move over to manga. So.
All right, so let's get started. Obviously, 2020 was a very interesting year for all of you for a lot of different reasons, and for the manga industry, publishing industry as well. And it's from most indications, 2021 looks like things are going really well. How are, from where you're sitting, how are things for your companies?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. To put it plain and simple, things are historically great. I remember when we recorded this panel last year, it was around June 2020, and that was a time where, I don't even think all of the Barnes and Noble bookstores in the country were opened up. So needless to say, it was a pretty challenging time. Fast forward to a year later right now, we're seeing the if you want to use the term manga boom, we're basically seeing a second manga boom right now. Books are selling better than ever, whether that be a new series that launch or long-time series. Series that have existed for a decade or more are now selling better than they've ever been. So it really feels like manga can do no wrong right now.
Yeah, I'll jump in and echo what Mark said. It's pretty unprecedented right now, and we kind of use that word boom somewhat loosely at times, but it is a boom. Very different from prior year, as Mark also said. But where we end up, it's a crystal ball right now. Put your finger in the air and kind of get the temperature. We don't know where this is going to end. We've got many retailers jumping on the bandwagon. We've got unprecedented demand. We've got not being able to deliver all of our books that people want right now. So it's exciting, but also frustrating right now.
The contrast between the situation a year ago and now is absolutely unprecedented, which is the adjective we all keep using for the reason that the situation was completely unprecedented. When COVID really hit in March of last year, not just manga publishers, but publishers overall, nobody knew what was going to happen. The stores started closing. Speaking from our list and from what I understand, a lot of publishers did the same thing. We immediately started moving things out, started delaying publications. We were like, our bookstore is going to be around in 6 months. Who knows? We were cutting print runs. We were just kind of battening the hatches for what was going to be, what we thought was going to be a very bumpy ride. And then the exact opposite happened. And I guess because everybody was trapped at home with nothing to do except play video games and manga, all of a sudden August rolls around and we cannot keep books in stock. It's just flying, out of the warehouse. And right now we're still kind of riding the crest of that wave. As Kevin said, you need a crystal ball to kind of see where it's going to go from here. Historically, if you look at the sales patterns over a decade or more, the sales kind of follow the sine wave pattern. And if that holds, we're kind of at the top of one of those crests. If you go by historical precedent, is there going to be a decline again? Probably. But at this point, who knows? Maybe we're reaching some sort of new plateau, and it's going to be exciting to find out.
No, yeah, I completely agree with what Leyla is saying, especially at the end right there. It's interesting to be a smaller publisher, and I think Layla's kind of in the same type of position with Square being so new and just kind of hitting this wall that was COVID last year. And having those moments of doubt whether to push titles back or to be forced to do so, because not just retail was shut down, but also just infrastructure, printing shops, and that's possibly going to be a question a little later. We're not so much closed, but they adjusted their staffing, and that ended up creating a lot of delays on that part as well. We also had situations in regards to trade issues and paper coming in and out of the country, which is a little interesting. So, some of those things were clearly forced on us. Some of them, we had to make our own decisions, and we're at this point right now where there is just so much growth, and those numbers are really so high in such a rapid clip. It is a little, in a way, a little unsettling because it's hard to make any predictions that are realistic, I think. But one thing that I kind of noticed over the last year, and this is something that particularly as I'll keep on framing this from being a smaller entity, is that despite the fact that we're smaller, doing titles that are a little more niche, titles that are a little older, maybe a little more challenging, we're still on that same wave. We haven't necessarily been bucked off yet. So I'm kind of a lot more optimistic about where that curve is going to come down. I think it's going to be a little flatter, not flat, but it's not going to be as severe a drop down, or at least I hope it won't be, which I hope is an indication of how much the industry has grown, even over this last year of shelter in place and all these other issues.
So Ivan, what's going on with Kodansha?
Yeah, I mean, just to mirror what everybody's saying, it's pretty good. It's pretty unprecedented and like overwhelmingly positive. And I think part of what Leyla was saying in terms about people getting more being locked up indoors and potentially saying, okay, now I'll try an anime, now I'll try a manga. I think when you see some of the data like Netflix pulled out in terms of their viewership increasing like over 100%, like in terms of manga viewership, like that signals to me like something incredibly positive in terms of people's acceptance of anime and manga, and their interest in wanting to try out several different stories within it. So, been seeing great numbers across the board, like even for a lot of backlists, which has been kind of amazing. And I think part of it is that, now that folks have tried like the latest and greatest and are like, hey, I remember this series, what happened to it? Oh, there's like 10x plus volumes. Okay, I'll just go read it all in a go.
Wow.
I think the accessibility of manga and anime is so much greater now than it was even 5 years ago. So with that perfect storm of people finally getting curious enough to try it and being able to find it basically anywhere for a fair price, I think that just means like even more folks are going to be getting into anime and manga. Or at least that's one of my biggest hopes, but it's what we're seeing.
So, I mean, generally speaking, shonen manga still rules the roost, right? Is that true across the board?
I think
Well, at VIZ Media, yes, it does. Our
How
Shonen Jump imprint.
about the rest of you?
Yeah,
yeah. So we at Yen Press, I think when people say shonen, there's a specific type of of manga that people are thinking of. We have less of the conventional shonen manga. So what I would say is that yeah, anything that classifies as sort of the more mainstream manga, whether it be what's considered conventional shonen or in our case conventional isekai, it's all doing pretty amazingly. I think if you looked at any point in the Western manga industry's history, those titles, those series are the ones that would chart at the top. It's still the case, just to a crazy exponential level. What's nice is that there's a lot of other things that are doing quite well, but let's leave that for a subject that I'm sure we'll address later down the line. Shonen manga's kicking ass, plain and simple.
How about you, Ed? You were saying something?
Now, I mean, for us, it's a lot different. Now, our catalog doesn't necessarily kind of like Yen doesn't necessarily focus so much on shonen titles, but we do have a few. And to see works like Kaiji, to see works like The Girl with the Sanpaku Eyes, Shintaro Kago's Love Gun, and now in its third printing, it's really, and then a number of our BL titles are just kicking ass. It's really interesting to see just how broad the market has become over time, and it's pretty cool to have a catalog that isn't just reliant on what's on Crunchyroll or what's on Netflix, and hope that continues. I have a feeling it will.
I know, Layla, before Mark jumped, you were wanting to say something. Can you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say that for our tiny little, Square Enix's tiny little fledgling list, Soul Eater, which these are perfect edition reprints of Soul Eater, which is an older shonen series, are far and away the best performing manga title that we have, and it's a testament to the strength of the shonen genre in general. But I think that, to Ed's point, kind of the rising tide lifts all boats. So even though shonen is still the strongest seller, we're kind of seeing maybe the attention that it brings to manga overall having an effect on people willing to explore other types of manga. Like, it's kind of the entryway into this area. And the popularity of shonen is, I mean, aside from the qualities of the works themselves, which are very well written, good characterization and everything else, are fueled by, honestly, tie-in exposure, primarily anime. The thing that caused the last manga explosion in around that 2007, 2008 period was the heyday of kind of cable anime. Cartoon Network and Adult Swim and everybody staying up to watch Bleach at midnight, that you could directly tie that to how shonen manga was performing. And today you can directly tie how shonen manga is performing to all the streaming options now. I think that's a huge part of its popularity. Secondarily, shonen will draw in readers of all demographics. Male readers, female readers, young, old, it really kind of covers the waterfront in terms of the entire manga readership, whereas other genres like shoujo or BL or, isekai tend to have more segmented demographics. So shonen, I think, is going to continue its dominance for a while. That's not to say that all the other genres aren't doing very well, they are. But there's a reason why, things like Shonen Jump and the other mainline series are doing so well.
I know, Kevin, of course, Shonen Jump is the 600-pound gorilla in shonen manga. And I know the app, the Shonen Jump app, as well as the subscription, is a big part of that. Can you speak to a little bit about what you have plans there to expand the offerings there?
Yeah, we're going to continue the model that we've been going on and seeing what's been working in Japan, and then bringing that over to the subscription service. And then if it performs well enough in the subscription service, we maybe, flipping it to print and digital, or it's just sometimes just digital. We've far exceeded our expectations for number of subscribers. It rose dramatically during the COVID crisis. Again, people were at home having time on their hands and binging, just like they binge on Netflix. They were binging on manga. Lack of discovery in the stores for some frontlist series helped fuel the rise of backlist sales. But also, as Ivan said, they had time on their hands, sitting at home, finally getting around to a series they wanted to read for such a long time, and buying box sets or buying 10, 15, 20 volumes at a shot and reading it. And the subscription service, the Jump service, is a very low cost entry point into being able to try new series. And that just helped the print side of our business.
So I wanted to ask too, because we've mentioned this a couple of times, the problems with the print supply chain, that you are not able to get reprints, you're not able to keep books in stock. I'm wondering, has that impacted what you're deciding to take on licensing wise? Are you deciding to take things on as just digital only for now, or you're like take digital now and then print much later? Or tell me a little bit about how you're thinking about taking on new titles now.
For VIZ Media, the printing crisis has not affected our print schedule, and we don't really expect it to. We're still acquiring things on a regular basis and filling out our pub schedule just as we would if there was no print issues. The printing issues right now are just basically affecting our reprints.
I see. Anyone else?
Yeah. Speaking on behalf of Yen Press, I can say that we have not changed our approach to launching new series. If you take a look at what we launch on a given month, it largely resembles what you would have seen any other year. So proceeding as normal, it's just a bit more challenging. and like Kevin mentioned, it's particularly challenging for the reprints. But I'd say for new series that are coming out, I think there's no better service we can give our fans than giving them the new series that they're eager to start collecting. So that's definitely something that we didn't want to stop. Definitely wanted to keep going with it, especially in a time like now where there's more people than ever who love manga and love collecting manga.
Really, in terms of what we end up keeping to digital first, is usually up to the discretion of licensing and editorial. But it is really a nice testing bed to see, what could do well, like given the digital audience. We know that they're fairly different, even amongst different platforms. I mean, you could tell that a reader on Kindle might be reading a little bit more josei shoujo stuff, where say a reader on even Comixology, which is partner company, but different audiences might be reading more in terms of shonen seinen. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what we publish is really just to kind of fit the ethos of the company itself, where it's a variety of not just shonen, not just any specific genre, but really trying to hit a lot of different categories, because I think that there's, my feeling in working for Kodansha for a year and a half is that we really try to reach as many people as possible, and so that requires all sorts of genres, stories, and even formats in which it's put out.
Ed, you want to jump in?
Yeah, slightly different situation in our side. I guess it's partially, or actually mostly, due to the fact that we are really, really tiny, and our schedules are a lot more cramped than I think most publishers are. So while I've been hearing that reprints tend to be a little bit more of an issue for some of the other publishers that are with us today, for us, we've been forecasting those things relatively well. Pretty early on with COVID. On the flip side, releasing new books. We've been seeing, and we do the majority of our printing domestically out in Chicago, and we've been seeing a number of additional delays on that side that we've been trying to make adjustments for, but we send out a book every 4 weeks, so priority isn't what it is.
I see.
Little vertical, and instead of the old turnaround of like 2-3 weeks, it might be a month, might be 2 months. A little frustrating, obviously for the customer under those circumstances, because like some other publishers, we did decide to hold off last year specifically through the summer mostly on the majority of our schedule, and now having to play catch up with a staff of 3 is not too easy.
So I think one of the things that fans are most curious about is what goes into your decision-making process when you choose new titles to pick up. Obviously, what we get here in North America is the tippy-tip top of the iceberg of what's available in Japan, both backlist and current titles. So maybe let's go down the line. Let's say, what kind of things go into your consideration when you think like, yeah, we're going to pick this one up, or we're going to pass on this one? And let's see. I haven't heard from Leyla yet. Let's start with you.
Give me the hard question.
I'm so sorry.
Kevin can start. No. Yeah, it's so there's every single publisher is going to have different considerations when they're evaluating what material they want to pick up. What might work for Square Enix is not the same thing that's going to work for VIZ, which is not the same thing that is going to work for Denpa, which is not the same thing that is going to work. There is still very much an issue of imprint and publisher identity when it comes to publishing books. We all have our specializations. VIZ is obviously heavily concentrated in Shonen. Kadokawa and therefore Yen Press is heavily concentrated in isekai and light novel tie-ins. Kodansha kind of covers the waterfront. Ivan, you guys kind of do everything. Ed has more of a artistic and independent sensibility in what he's picking up. Square Enix is a little bit more on the, not surprisingly, the video game tie-ins and more on the commercial end of things. So the identity of the imprints and kind of what your publishing list is inform that decision. Secondarily, obviously, as publishers, we're looking at what is going to succeed in the market. And I think that from the fan perspective, the whole thing is very opaque and mysterious. And, why isn't publisher X picking up my favorite series Y? There's just an endless number of reasons for why that could be the case. It could be that the publisher doesn't think it's going to work here. The sensibilities of the Japanese audience are not the same sensibilities as the North American audience, which are not the same sensibilities as the French audience or the Brazilians or anything else. I mean, there's still very distinct market preferences. So you have to take that into consideration. And then finally, there's certain kind of, how do I say this? Certain types of material that are more suitable for certain markets than not. And the issue with manga, which makes the evaluation a little bit more complicated, is if you're a normal trade book publisher and a book doesn't work, it's one and done. Like, okay, that title didn't work, we're going to move on to the next one. If you're a manga publisher, depending on the length of that series, you are locked in. So if a series doesn't work, it's not simply that a book doesn't work. It means that a book is not going to work possibly the next 64 times. And that is an incredible financial burden for any list to bear. So if, somebody is asking why, I noticed that you were talking about like Hajime no Ippo, why is everybody committing to that? Well, because you've got to be really sure you have a very strong readership for 100+ volumes.
131 volumes.
31 volumes. I mean, that is a very, very clear-cut and brutal financial calculation. And so these are all, I mean, and this is obviously an incredibly like kind of high level view of what the issues are. There's so many considerations, and it just varies with every single publisher.
Yeah, absolutely everything Layla said. I'm a sales guy, so it's got to be the commercial factor. There has to be sales potential, but we balance our list between our imprints, and our acquisition editors. They read the books. We see what they do in Japan, and there's certain things that our parent companies in Japan want us to publish. So, but again, being the sales side of things, it's the commercial side.
I see you nodding a lot, Ivan.
No, I mean it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, what sells is what we want. The one thing that I wanted to address is what Layla said, of just the idea of fans saying, why hasn't X company published my favorite manga? The reality is that sometimes it's on the roadmap, and you just have to wait like a little bit longer. And like one of the around sometime last year, when we do a lot more sort of these video events that we do, it's called Kodansha Live, where we try to keep fans as well as anybody who would be interested informed in terms of like what's coming out and what are some things we're promoting, or potentially like new licenses and series coming out. We for a while got a lot of people sort of bombing the chat saying, Blue Lock when Blue Lock, and then we put it out, and it was just like one of those things is like, yes, because it's opaque in terms of like what is going to be published by any given publisher. Sometimes the fans, can get caught up in wanting to see their favorite series localized, and I think what I'd say to some of those fans is, maybe wait a little bit. Which is not to say that everything that is someone's favorite is going to come out, because that's just not how publishing works. But sometimes patience can be rewarded. So, Blue Lock fans out there, it's out. Please go read it.
Please buy the heck out of it.
Please buy the heck out of it. Yeah. But yeah, I believe Mark has got something to say.
What goes into the decision of what manga companies like ours acquire? I'm going to quote a wise mentor figure of mine in saying, can I sell it? That's kind of the basic question that's asked when considering what manga, what books to bring over, what books to acquire. And there's two ways to look at that sentiment. Can I sell it? When when one hears that, they might think, oh, you're looking out for those obvious anime hits, anime tie-ins. And yes, of course, those are things that are looked out for. Those are, of course, that does increase the likeliness of a title, a series being acquired. But in my time in the industry, I've been most satisfied by the other half of can I sell it, and that's of course the times when gambles have been taken, which is why I'm really happy to work for a company like Yen Press, a company that historically has, we've shown ourselves to be the kind of company that's taken these gambles. Light novels once upon a time was looked at as not a viable category when it was given a try before. Then we give it the full Yen-on treatment, and now it's doing amazing for us. This year, we're the first to publish Korean webcomics in a pretty significant manner, and that's Solo Leveling took off as one of the best-selling graphic novel series of the year. So it might seem like an obvious choice, but there is definitely an element of risk taking and gambling that goes into that. In my time in the industry, whether it's those examples I laid out or other cases I've come across, I'd say that I've been most personally satisfied at the time where the companies I've worked for took risks on titles, on series, on categories that might have not seemed like obvious bestsellers, or it wasn't out there in the market, but we believed that there were fans for it in the markets, fans we could sell it to, so to speak, and it did well. So yeah, it's a combination of going for the obvious choices and also gambling for those that might be less obvious.
Well, let me ask you, building on that question, let me ask you a question. Can you maybe name a title that's in your list that you consider to be something that's kind of maybe a little little outside of your comfort zone, but maybe you think people should take a chance on and check it out?
Please,
Or
please go
is
ahead.
there a
That's a good
category of
question.
books that you've started to publish that are kind of like, wow, I couldn't have done this 5 years ago?
That one's a good question. I have said at certain points in this conversation that it feels like everything is doing well. There's a lot of categories that aren't the mainstream shonen hits that are performing quite well. For us, for example, two of our biggest releases this year were boys love titles in Sasaki and Miyano and I Cannot Reach You. And boys love has always had its audience, but I'm talking about like two of our best selling new series of the year. We keep talking about not being able to keep books in print. Those are two that it's just really hard to keep them in stock because there's such a fan base for it. So there are smaller categories that I would say had its audience, but now it's there. A lot of them are seeing their glory days. So yeah, boys love is the. Oh, you know what? I'll bring one more too. If you want to look at I'm gonna call it classic series because and when I say classic series, y'all might be thinking of the like Osamu Tezuka classic, but I'm talking about classic in the sense that they were on shelves when I was a youth. Series along the lines of a Black Butler, a Fruits Basket, a Soul Eater. Those are doing better than ever. It's kind of wild because they've been around for a while, but now they're selling like the hottest things ever to an exponential level. I'm not even talking about like a bit better than last year or 2 years ago. I'm talking about like off the charts with Fruits Basket. It feels like it's 2003 all over again. So yeah, that's my contributions. I'll leave it there in case other people want to add to categories that are doing quite well. Boys love classic series are doing quite well.
Go ahead, Ivan. All you.
Yeah, no, Mark, I'm very glad to hear that Boys Love is like one of the higher top selling categories like for Young Press. Like I think honestly like this is sort of tied. One of the books that it's not that I wasn't like outside of my comfort zone. It's just that like I had not seen it published in manga or this kind of story. It's released last week is Boys Run the Riot, which is a transmasculine coming of age manga created by transmasculine mangaka Keito Gaku. And it's just like this is not a book that I've ever seen published. And just to kind of see the audience that is really excited for it, it's I think that there are potentially some Boys Love fans, and not that Boys Run the Riot is Boys Love. It's the wanting to see yourself in various different mediums. I think Boys Love gives some people that ability to see these sort of relationships that exist in a medium that they love. I think for trans people to be able to see themselves in manga in much more positive lights, or at least much more like grounded, real life stakes ways, is kind of important in all media. And I think that in manga, it's one of those places where it may not be seen as much. And so, this is one of those books that, once I saw it on the licensing list, I was like, this is going to be great. This is like, I couldn't have had like projections for like numbers or anything like that. It's more that I knew that we were putting out a book that would reach an audience that wanted to see representation, wanted to see themselves, wanted to see stories about themselves. And that's the kind of books that like I'm proudest of that we get to publish at Kodansha. Because those stories matter.
It's two of our strongest titles have been Soul Eater, which is that second wave kind of classic shonen series, and Cherry Magic, which is a BL series, which has now gone into its third printing. And I've been doing this for long enough that I kind of have a sense of what, or I thought I had a sense of what a genre would typically do. And Cherry Magic didn't have an anime or anything else attached to it. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, the first printing's almost out. And then I was like, okay, I guess we got to scramble to reprint. And then we did a second printing, and then that went out the door, and now we're on a third. And I don't have an explanatory rubric for that. I don't know why this is happening. It's great, but I can't say why all of a sudden, these genres are becoming so strong. And the case of I think my son is gay is, or I think our son is gay is interesting because the mangaka Okura, we had published that Blue Sky Feel when I was still at Viz. We published that Blue Sky Feeling, which was also Okura's, which did fine. It did good, and I was kind of expecting that same level of performance with this new series, and it's like blown those other figures out of the water. And we're talking about a difference in time of 2 to 3 years. What has changed fundamentally in the market for the same content? I don't know. Maybe it's like Ivan said. Maybe there's people want to see more representation now. Maybe it's just simply the market as a whole is so much larger. But it's a great development to see. I mean, and not just from a sales perspective, but just from a manga fan perspective.
Kevin, Dick Fight Island. Oh my God.
You're really right. And the senior editor for that imprint for Sublime, she fought hard for that title, and she did right. But just what everyone else said, it's amazing that in the past year we have seen the rise of BL sales, and for our imprint Sublime just go through the roof in literally a year. That Blue Sky Feeling, Leyla, we're now reprinting and selling those numbers just like your series.
Is that right? Wow.
But we have a series called Given, now the best-selling Sublime series of all time. And the reprint numbers on those are up and around the same levels as some of our middle Shonen series. The sales are incredible worldwide. But Dick Fight Island, I mean, literally right out of the gate, #1 on Amazon's manga romance list still today. We just can't keep it in stock.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know Denpa has Kuma, right?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this before, but BL and the Kuma line surprisingly well right from the get-go. And it really picked up steam once we onboarded with our distributor consortium. But basically every title that we put out has gone to reprint. Some of them within a matter of weeks. We're kind of like in the situation with Leyla having to try to maybe adjust because looking at past data, we had a feeling of what our numbers should have been, but the market has completely changed, and it's interesting to have this like conversation right now about like what type of genres we're trying now. For us, whether it's BL with the Kuma, we're doing some interesting things in that regard too. But Denpa doesn't necessarily shy away from genre too much. It's more what tends to be challenging that we do try, and if there's anything that has been a little still hasn't like fully gotten into stride for us, it's josei titles. We keep on trying. We've got more for next year. We've got March Comes In Like a Lion, which I hope comes in like a lion next year. But that category is still a little challenging. I hope other publishers keep on plugging away at that as well, because I love the stuff that's in that category. And if we're talking about representation, that's a very interesting place to find very, very intriguing titles, and a lot of them have analogs to the graphic novel world that we see here in the States too. So it's not honestly all that foreign, even though it hasn't taken off as much as we would have liked to have seen it so far.
Interesting. I want to also bring up the part in past conversations I've had with all of you. We've talked about the impact of piracy on your business, and lately I haven't been hearing as much about piracy and how it impacts your sales and how it impacts your decisions to pick up titles. I remember in the past I've heard if a title is heavily scanlated, that counts against a title being picked up. Is that still true today? Is piracy still affecting your business?
Piracy is still out there. And I feel where it hurts the most is where, when publishers are working on the margins. And, for a public like Denpa, we live there. We strive there. And we like to break the perceptions that people have of what a marginal title could be. But it doesn't necessarily help when, half a year down the line, we end up seeing a slowdown and an inverse correlation of just people actually ripping off our ebooks, not so much scanning their own. So,
Mark, you want to offer some comments on that?
Yeah, well, I'll start by answering the two questions related to piracy that you asked. One being, does it affect acquisition decisions, and two, is it affecting sales? One, I would say that it does not affect acquisition decisions in the sense that typically the things that are pirated are things that people like and things that are popular. If any of us shied away from publishing titles that were pirated, we wouldn't publish any manga. to be
fair enough.
To answer the second question about its effect on sales, like we've said many times through the course of this conversation, we're at an unprecedented time where books are selling better than ever. I'd be foolish to say it does not affect sales, but sales are doing amazingly well right now. But here's the thing, and I think this is the important thing to bring up, especially if we're having this conversation and if we're talking to an audience of manga fans. It's just not a good thing to do. It's frankly a thing to do to an artist. I feel like we're at a time right now where fans are more conscious than ever of concepts like supporting the artist, Patreon and Ko-fi culture, or Ko-fi coffee. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I think it's coffee.
Coffee. All right, coffee culture. Coffee culture is huge right now. Supporting the artist is a big sentiment that a lot of fans subscribe to. Within fan art communities, people talk about stealing fan art, or pressuring everybody to credit the artist when sharing images. These are sentiments that I did not see 5 years ago, and a lot of fans, who like manga, say these things on social media. And I would like to see that extend more into the way they treat the published manga. It does feel like sometimes there is a certain segment of fans who will look at that different. You're officially published and you've made it. I can pirate it. I don't know if this is consciously what they're thinking through, but it feels that way sometimes. With that said, I do feel like we are at a time where a lot of the young fans are actually, that sentiment I described, the sentiment of supporting the artist, that is actually translating into their relationship with manga. I think for those of you who are on that track, for those of you who do support the idea of supporting the artist and thus shying away from piracy, keep going. You're awesome.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna start moving towards the future, and I want to ask you a little bit about, things are going really well now, and when things are going really well, more money comes into the business and you can do different things and more things are possible. Where do you see the business going in 5 years? I'll start with Kevin. See what you say.
Yeah, get your crystal ball out again.
Or where do you, if everything was awesome, where would you hope it would go?
Well, let me go back to something Leyla said a little earlier. I've been around this business for way longer than I want to admit, and the business does go in peaks and valleys, no matter which category, but the book business in general. But where I see manga and the industry right now, and I'll lump anime in there and pop culture. I think we're in a time, we're in the middle of something historic happening, where we are moving from the pop culture side of things into the mass merchandising, mass culture side of things. Never before has manga, even an anime, even science fiction and fantasy, been more accepted than it is now. We are way behind, in front of the curtain now. And for whatever reason it's because of manga, it's because of Western graphic novels, it's superheroes, it's Marvel, it's DC, it's Big Bang Theory, it's all of that. But it's people our age passing things on to our kids, even grandkids, of things that we grew up with. So I think where it's going from here and for the next 5 years is it's going to steady out pretty nicely. Um, you've got what I think's not going to happen is something that happened prior, the last boom and the crash, is you're not going to see a bunch of people piling on and throwing it out there just to try to get sales. We have more sophisticated publishers, we have more sophisticated retailers, we have more sophisticated readers right now. And just putting something out, putting it on the shelf and hoping it'll sell, that's not the way to do this. We, as gatekeepers, part of our job of filling out our pub schedules is to be a gatekeeper and try to publish what the fans want, what the fans will read, what the fans will buy. So I think we're going to steady out for a little while, higher than we were, but maybe not as high as 2020. But I think the future is bright. I see a lot more IPs possibly coming to America, a lot more franchises, and that's just good for the industry all around.
Let's go to Ivan. Let's see what you have to say.
What's it called? No, completely agree with what Kevin is like. This a little bit of like what I'd hope to see is that as sales come back down to normal, we come at a higher threshold than we were before. And I think Kevin, what you're saying in terms of like anime and manga breaking out into the mainstream, like absolutely. I think the fact that a movie like Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, Mugen Train could show up in the U.S. and still make numbers is pretty dang amazing. The fact that it's like, I believe it still might be the highest grossing movie in Japan now, wild. And I think I saw an article today for like Shiro Bako movie coming to the States, like in theaters, and just like, this is such a niche property that I can't believe is getting theater release, but it speaks to the kind of people that want to go out and see these movies like in theaters, want to experience these properties, and that all translates into people enjoying new and different kinds of manga, so that it's not just your typical like Dragon Ball Z fan or Sailor Moon fan. It's like then they break out into what else is out there, what can I find? And I think like one of the magic things about manga is that there's literally a manga about anything, and it is awesome. Like yeah, no, I do think it's an exciting time, and I do think that there's going to be a lot more people excited about anime and manga. Like one thing that I hope, and this might be like a bit idealistic, is that I hope that even within 5 years we get more recognition for the creators rather than only the properties. Kentaro Miura. I started seeing articles when he died, celebrating his work on Berserk, celebrating him, and
On
it's
NPR.
Yeah.
On New York Times. That was me. That was so great.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, not that he died, but it was great that
right,
people recognized him.
That's the thing. No, it's great that he's being recognized, but it's sad that it came at the cost of him dying. For him to be a known name among people that weren't just into manga, that weren't just into Berserk. And so I know that there's definitely an issue, like even in terms of like what I've encountered, like marketing manga is like, oh wow, people are really focused on just the property, and there are few known names that exist, like people know, like some people know Isayama Sensei for Attack on Titan, but more people know Attack on Titan than not. So, again, but that might sound like idealistic and not, business focused, but these are great stories. These are great properties, and I think that there are a lot more names that are getting remembered in comics these days, like in U.S. comics, and I hope that some of that translates to the U.S. for manga.
All right, so Leyla, you've seen stuff. You've seen it, the ups and the downs. What are your hopes for the next 5 years?
pretty much what Kevin and Ivan said. I mean, the last big kind of boom and bust that happened in around that 2009, 2010 period. I don't think we're going to replicate that this time. I will qualify this by saying that publishers are kind of like inveterate pessimists to begin with. I was recently reading this piece that somebody had written, talking about the challenges and the bookstore channel and all that sort of stuff. And I'm reading it and going, yeah, we've got all this to deal with. And then, somebody was like, yeah, that was from 1905. And I'm like, right, okay, so like nothing has changed. But we, back in the heyday of the last big manga boom in 2007, people were making a lot of the same predictions of like, manga is going to become the new Disney, it's going to become, the new DC and all that sort of stuff. And then we saw what happened afterwards. However, I think the circumstances are fundamentally different this time around because of two major things. One of which is that fully 50% of the manga sales back then were with the Borders group. And some people listening to this now may have no idea what a Walden Books is, but back in the ancient Jurassic days of manga fandom, Borders, Walden Books, and B. Dalton comprised well over half of the market. The economic crash in 2008, 2009 took out that entire group. So literally overnight, manga lost half of its retail channels in America. There's no similar situation to that right now, so that even if there is any sort of economic disruption, unless Amazon goes belly up, which is unlikely, the sales channels are going to remain stable. So even if there is an adjustment, it's not going to be anything like what we saw before. So setting the native publisher pessimism aside, I think that personally, I'm very optimistic. I do think there's been some sort of sea change that has happened in terms of taking the manga and anime genre into the mainstream. That's not going to walk back. We're now on, I guess, our third generation of quote unquote native, manga and anime fans in the United States. So it's kind of here to stay.
Ed, what are your hopes for the next 5 years, manga biz?
I'll just start off by having a little bit of pessimism off of what Leyla said.
Of course, Ed.
We're publishers.
Obviously, I mean, sure, neither BNN nor Diamond make up half of the market, but both of those entities are going through some transitions right now too, and lose 30%, lose 15%, 10%, whatever Diamond is for you all. That's still significant. It's not a death knell. It's not gonna bring us back to the numbers that we saw in 2009, 2010, right, which was basically chopping off almost 4/5 of the market. But I mean, dollars wise, right? But that could be that could be pretty frustrating for all of us, especially as people do come back, and I'm sure you guys are seeing improved numbers of BNN and the like now. We do want to see these businesses healthy, and I hope they're all around for not just 5 years, for 10, 15, 30 years, right? But to go back to the original question, where I would like to see is just a continuation in regards to the growth of what is released, more challenging works. It's really interesting to see what Seven Seas is doing, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to do now that they're with Random House Penguin Group. Better distribution, better outreach, better availability, things like that. I think or opportunities like that. I think are going to be just so much more expansive for all of us, and it is kind of going to trickle down. I feel as each of our different houses try new things, and I hope we do take advantage of that flattening as we come down, because I think if we continue to do that, we will be closer to what Ivan said, and we will be closer to having a manga literally for everybody. And once we get to those points, or as we're achieving some of that, it would be really cool to start not just recognizing more of the talent that is overseas, and maybe bringing those people over here as events come back, but also maybe a little bit more recognition for the people who actually work on this stuff domestically, maybe raising wages, maybe giving a lot more of a face to those people, because I feel that's something that's been neglected to an extent. And I also am kind of noticing that's becoming a topic of conversation as well, with not just amongst the freelancer editorial community, but also even amongst fandom as well.
Yeah, I think that's been a really positive trend I've noticed. I mean, maybe it's the social media I cover, but I've noticed that translators and letterers are sharing their craft and their point of view, and they're trying to inform fans of their contributions to manga in English. Mark, let's finish this off with you. What's your vision for the next 5 years?
All right, to answer that question, I'll give you my 3 predictions and
Okay.
then my wish for the 5 to 10 year trajectory of this manga industry that we all work in. So prediction number 1 is that we're in a pretty unprecedented time, as we've been saying throughout the conversation. I think we're gonna see this going for a bit. I'd be foolish to say that there won't be a dip, here and there, but I think it's gonna remain pretty high. I think manga's popularity is here to stay for a while, if not forever. The second prediction that I will make is that you're gonna see some pretty interesting things with digital. Deb, I know there was a plan to talk about digital a bit, so to address what I was gonna say there's there's already some pretty interesting developments in digital. For as great as manga's doing, here's an interesting thing to think about. Some of the most read comics out there, one of the biggest growth areas in people reading sequential art is the Korean webcomic platforms. We're talking about millions of people who don't identify as comic readers. We're putting money to read the latest episodes, the latest chapters. It's pretty wild to see what's happening there. Right now, for the most part, outside of a few subscription services or a few apps that are made here and there, I would say manga still has some room to grow to match that popularity and accessibility that's been seen with the Korean webcomics. And my prediction is that there will be something. It'll be interesting to look 5 to 10 years from now and see the ways in which people are reading manga digitally. I don't think it will just be what we see today. As great as the growth has been, I think you're going to see bigger growth as as digital manga platforms develop, grow, and get started. And the third prediction I'm going to make, I gave you my take on piracy, and I gave you the optimism that I feel of fans who are appreciating the thought of supporting the artists. I think that sentiment's going to grow. I'm going to make the bold prediction that we are going to get to a point where most people who consume manga are consuming it in legitimate means, whether they're buying manga physically or they're reading it digitally. I think through many points in manga's existence here in the English-speaking world, much of it has been consumed illegitimately. Some may even say that most of it was being consumed illegitimately. And I'm going to predict that we are going to get to a point where most people are reading their manga legitimately, both because they want to support the artist and also because of the efforts made by those who work in this industry and those who are going to come into the industry. And last but not least, the wish that I have is I'd like to see this kind of is parallel with what's been said by others, but I would like to see more manga come out here. I would like to see it get to a point where almost anything that a fan could wish to read, they'll be able to read. And I don't think it's going to be literally everything, but I think we might get to a point where it's most things, honestly. Like in my time working in this industry, I had a short list of things that I thought would never see the light of day, never get officially translated into English. And rapidly that list crossing everything off. It's all coming out here legitimately in one way or another. So I had to make a new list. And honestly, I think, seeing the direction we're going, I'm going to cross all those off the list too. So 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to read almost anything that we want to read. We'll be overwhelmed by the options that we'll have at our hands. So.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. This was such an interesting conversation, and I want to give you one last chance to maybe give either your wish for the coming year or pimp one book that you think everyone should pick up real quick.
My wish is that people continue to read manga and that we are able to supply you with all the manga you would like to have. One book I'd like to pitch, probably My Hero Academia Ultra Analysis, the official character art book coming out in October.
All right, Ed, let's hear your wish and your pick hit that people should pick up.
Yeah, I just wish to be able to enjoy talking about or moments where we can talk about manga face to face again. Hopefully that will happen in not too distant future. And my title for you all would be Moto Hageo's Little Leo, which we just received office copies of. It's a lovely little quirky josei title about a talking, working kitty with a lot of the flair and thoughtfulness that we all know from Moto Hageo.
Awesome. How about you, Leyla?
I guess my wish for the year is to that the situation continues to normalize kind of post-COVID, and those who have worked with me have been subjected to my incessant bitching about cons, but I find that I actually miss them now, which is bizarre. I never would have.
I'm so glad I'm sitting down.
Kevin has witnessed meltdowns in the past. No, I mean I miss the face-to-face community aspect of it. I know the fans do. I really hope that comes back at some point. Hope that we're all able to keep printing books in a timely manner to give readers what they want. And my title plug is, this being Pride Month and all, I Think Our Son is Gay, which is just out from Square Enix and is legitimately one of the most kind of soothing, heartwarming, ray of sunshine manga that I've read in a really long time.
That's awesome. It is a great book. I recommend it as well. All right, Ivan, what's your wish and what's your manga that everyone should pick up?
My wish. I'm gonna make it very selfish and very not possible, but my wish is that somehow Kodansha gets the license for Neon Genesis Evangelion, and that we get to publish all the manga as well as anything else from it. Anyways, I guess, and then the book that I want to pimp out is, I mentioned it earlier, but Boys from the Riot. It is incredibly heartfelt, and it's mostly a slice of life. And though the sort of coming out portion of the story is happens very early on, the rest of the narrative arc feels like it's going to be not only coming out but existing and being out loud and proud. I think that's sort of where the story is going, and it's in its first volume right now, and we have 4 volumes total coming out to complete the series. But yeah, it's really cool, and I highly recommend it for anybody, really. So.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, everyone. It was great to catch up with all of you, and I hope you all continue to sell lots of books, and I hope that we'll see each other in person someday very soon. Thanks a lot.